see. All right.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hey there, I appreciate it. Really, really do. Thanks for giving me the time.
All right, you need to tell me again, Chris, what you're looking for, and does this have to do? What does this have to do? Just, I might have confused myself about what you're trying to talk about. Is it just the Ukraine thing?
No, well, we're looking to talk about State of the Union, leading up to kind of the historical nature around the president's State of the Union address that is coming Tuesday. You know, he faces a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of different things that he's juggling right now. And I want a historian's perspective on kind of, have we seen anything like this in terms of, lots of challenges that the president's facing right now while he's giving this address?
Yes, I'd say there are three biggies. One is the immediate Ukraine crisis. The other is the...
Real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you could just drop the camera down a little bit, center yourself a little bit more. Perfect. Yep, just like that.
Okay. All right. The pandemic, Ukraine, and the crisis over the election and the failure of the Republican Party to endorse the legitimacy of the election. Those are the three biggies. Now you're also talking about inflation, the economic impact of Ukraine in terms of one of the reasons why he can't do what Ukraine wants in terms of the last kind of sanctions is that Europe is not prepared to suffer the consequences that would entail. To be historical, that one of the two major parties has used its state-based power to essentially attempt to disenfranchise a substantial portion of the Black electorate. And it's almost like Jim Crow without the lynching. We haven't seen that. I mean, for a long time, and we thought we were past that. And I think one of the things that surprised me as a historian is that the Trump presidency has been like an airburst in the night to expose the fact that a significant minority of the white population really regards Martin Luther King's dream as a nightmare. And it's not just Southern states, but let's say 30 to 40% of the population. So what is Biden facing? And you will have to have your own definition of the crises. Biden is not an inherently charismatic person. I think he looks old, and though I think he's performed capably and competently, he doesn't have the kind of personality that executive leaders in this kind of crisis forgive. I have to, that's all right, come on. You want to get down? Come on. No. Labradoodle. Somebody's coming by the house. And great presidents, and I was on the committee for 20 years of historians and political scientists to rate presidents. The three greatest presidents in American history chronologically are Washington, Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt comes in just beneath that. What they have in common is they all oversaw a major crisis. if you don't have a major crisis, it has to be major, you can't make the list. Clinton was always upset that he didn't have a crisis that could propel him forward. So Biden is a president that is facing a crisis and an overlapping series of crises. I would say, from a historian's point of view, too, that the political institutions that have served us well for 200 years, they're worn out. None of the founders would believe it. We still have certain of these things, like the Electoral College. They didn't like it then. But the filibuster in its current form is, and by the current form, I mean, it's really cloture that's a killer. But whether or not Biden can respond as a great president in this crisis is still unknown. I'm of the mind that he's doing a reasonably good job. Unlike many members of the liberal press, and I'm a liberal, I think that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, historians will say that the decision to get out of Afghanistan was one of the great acts of leadership. He knew he was going to take crap, but we ended our so-called longest war, and so what he's done, how will it look down the road? That's another question that I can't answer, but I'm telling you, I think he's done a reasonably good job. The addition of Ukraine on top of this pile amplifies the problem. He, in order to do what he needs to do, has to stop being the kind of politician he has been throughout his career. His values as a politician were shaped in the Senate. People that are presidents, usually that are great presidents, usually don't come out of the Senate. They were governors, mayors, anyway, generals. So if you draw a profile of Biden, he doesn't look like the kind of person that's going to manage this as effectively as one would like. I'll stop there. I think that the Trump presidency, on the one hand, has exposed who we really are, in a disarming way, not just on the race issue, but I would say 80% of the American citizenry could not pass the civics test required of all incoming immigrants to the nation. There's a failure of higher education here, or public education, and over top of it all, not even to be mentioned yet, is that if we don't act during his watch in a dramatically effective way, your children and my grandchildren will inherit a world that we would regard as close to uninhabitable. I mean, New York will be underwater and blah, blah, blah. And people will look back at this moment and say, what in heaven's name were you doing? Because we've known for 30 years what we need to do. And we actually have the technology to do it. My eldest son is head of the task force for climate change in the Nature Conservancy. So I've been bombarded with that. He's just back from the Congo. So that if you said to me, what's the greatest crisis facing the United States today? I would say it's climate change.
What I'm trying to gather too is, amid the crises, it sounds like there's also opportunity for the president here.
I agree that there's an opportunity for him to perform. The person who did this most effective, the two presidents who did this most effectively are Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt. They're models in that regard. But I was called by several programs to do a piece on, after 1 year of Biden's presidency, how would you rate him, kind of thing. And a bunch of MSNBC and I don't know who else. And one of the things I said is, what do you think would happen if you rated Lincoln after the first year? The South seceded. We lost the Battle of Bull Run. I mean, it's all bad. None of them had to live in the current media market. None of them had to deal with social media. I mean, George Washington, people say, well, what would he have done? I was on the book chat trail for months when he was writing for a book during the Iraq invasion. And I said, what would Washington do about Iraq? I said, he wouldn't know where Iraq was. They kept pressing me. And we want to know, I said, okay, what he'd say is, how did we get to be the British?
Right.
There's a limit. And even though I made my reputation as a historian of the founders, most of the founders would say, look, baby, we gave you the best we got. It's on you now. Okay. And anyway, there is, let's think together about what the opportunities Biden does have. I mean, I think that foreign policy remains something that's a province of the president in a way that doesn't require as much support from the Senate. The last time we went to war, the way the Constitution prescribes is December 8th, 1941.
Right.
We don't do that. And but foreign policy, I think his leadership on the Ukraine issue, his mobilization of NATO behind us to a much extent, and taking a firm stand for the principle that we continue to be the world leader in defining what we call democracy. The founders didn't call it democracy. Democracy was an epithet for them. But the rule of law, free markets, our definition of the kind of liberal order. While I think Biden, learning from Obama, was hoping, and one of the reasons to get out of Afghanistan is to pivot to China. Well, we're not going to be able to do that. We still have an obligation in Europe, and we have a man who is prepared to roll the dice in a way that only a truly desperate person can. We got a lot going for us here, though. I mean, Russia is no longer a world power. Really, Russia has an economy smaller than California's by far. This is a desperate effort to recover the old Soviet empire. I think we can win that one. I think the midterm elections will tell a lot. And I think the way in which they go, the statistical odds are against the administration. In 80% of the cases since 1900, when you've won both houses and the presidency, you lose both or one of the houses in the midterm. That it's just like why that happens. People say, let's have a change. And but he has an opportunity to form the message of the Democratic Party. And what the Republicans have given him a lot of opportunity there. There's a longstanding argument that goes back to the American Revolution and the founding era over government, the role of government. And is government them or is government us? Them has been winning big time for a long time. And there's a chance to reverse that, because we are facing crises that require coherence, national unity. The bad sign is that on the COVID thing, one of the ways to read that is that despite our scientific advancement on these vaccines are amazing things, we will never be able to get group immunity. And that's an acid test of a sort about a willingness to commit to the Commonwealth. Anyway, there are lots of challenges. Some of them, I think, are genuine opportunities, but it could go either way. And if I was trying to pick somebody who I thought would be able to handle this as effectively as any other leader in the possible choice, Biden wouldn't be that guy. If you're looking for somebody who's capable of empathy, to do well after hurricanes, if you're looking for somebody who can try to walk across the aisle, he would be great. That those are not the qualities of mind and heart necessary at this moment. And I think, a military commander, a Washington, a Grant, an Eisenhower, is more adept at doing that. Leadership, I mean, I was a dean of faculty for 12 years at one place. It was like leading cats, and everybody's sovereign, and that goes with the job. But as a historian, he is what we got. The party needs to come behind him completely, and he needs to frame the issues in a way that force the Republicans to have to explain what they've been doing over the last 2 years, and take the risk. Don't try. You're not going to win the core of the Trump constituency. Don't try. But push hard on those things. That he does have people around him who some of them are too many of them is old hands from Senate days, but I hope he's got people around him that can help him with this and push him in this direction, because of all of us have got a lot at stake on that. But as a historian, I don't want to over dramatize the moment we're facing in the way that some people, like a civil war is going to break out. Although if Vermont does tend to secede, I'm willing to go to Canada if Trump comes back. And they almost seceded during the American Revolution. But everybody wants to come to Vermont too. It's interesting. But anyway, as you reach a certain age, as I have reached. And by the way, I want to tell you off the cuff that I'm getting so old that I decided not to measure my life in years, but to measure my life in dogs. So when people ask me how old I am, I say I'm 13 dogs old. And you start to think about posterity. You start to think about what you've contributed or what you've not contributed to. You think about your grandchildren and the world that they're going to inherit. And the immediate crisis, I think, is Ukraine. I think the immediate political crisis is the off-year elections. There's a lot of energy out there among the younger generation that I taught at some really great schools for 40 years. What disenchants, what worries me is I think there really is an energy for commitment to a larger purpose than themselves. they're looking for some way to do that. I would be in favor of mandatory national service, not making military the only or even the primary one. But when I would say it to them at Williams or Amherst or Mount Holyoke and say, what about that? They say, are you crazy? I mean, people get ahead of me, and now they all got to go too, and when you graduate from college or even high school, you graduate with all these rights and responsibilities. They only think about rights.
Right.
Anyway, that kind of commitment to a larger sense of the purpose of the nation and of your state or your county or whatever it is needs to be revitalized. Again, I don't think Biden's the guy that can do that. But
let me ask you, I mean, have we ever had a State of the Union address where we've had this many issues compounded on top of each other?
I think Roosevelt faced that because he had the Depression, he had the World War, the war. Yeah. I think that, and you can look at his State of the Union addresses; they're pretty good models. And then his fireside addresses, and Doris Kearns Goodwin's stuff on him is really good in that. Lincoln is unimaginably brilliant with the words, and he's a poet as well as a president. And Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, coined the term the new nationalism, and was the first person to recognize that government power had to grow in response to industrialization and to the large size of the nation. And Theodore Roosevelt read a book a day when he was president. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, but he's also kind of a child, and when people after he got up a couple times and said some silly things, men behind him said, "Well, we all must remember that the president is 8 years old," and leadership.
Very adventurous, I heard. He used to bring heavyweight boxers into the White House and he'd fight them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, leadership isn't the norm in a democracy or a republic. It's not supposed to need great leaders. But when crises happen, genuine crises, they are absolutely essential. And I've made a living trying to claim that crises create leadership. Okay, and that's the test that Biden will have to pass. That it pulls out energies and imagination that would otherwise be latent. It's necessary. You can't go, and most of the people like we think of in the Revolutionary era would have been obscure, John Adams would have been an obscure lawyer in Boston. Jefferson would have been a guy, maybe he'd be remembered for his wine and his architecture, but that's about it. Washington would be a country squire in Virginia. They were forced to make choices that, like if they lose, they're going to get executed. And so that it's possible and that we're going to see leadership emerge here. And instead of thinking exclusively in terms of Biden, for example, I think that when the congressional committee starts to go on the air in the way of, and whatever this is on this January 6th thing, what's this guy from Maryland who's got a book out for himself now and because his son died and all that, but there are certain people that are going to emerge, and we're in a media age where you can blow them up really quickly, both ways. But it's a time to look for leadership because we need it. Maybe Biden, but you hear the reservations in my voice on that score.
Yeah.
And as a reporter or as a journalist, one thing I urge on you, this would seem perfectly natural for me to do. When you are trying to put together a story and you're trying to think about how to do it and frame it, ask yourself, what's the unbreaking news? Okay. You're forced to, you've got your face up against the window pane, and that's what you have to do. But the very questions that you're asking, Chris, are the kind of questions that I'm suggesting are the appropriate ones. Like, as a historian, I'm writing, I've just finished one book and I'm off to another called What Kind of Tragedy? The Founders and Why They Failed to End Slavery. And on the one hand, I watched the Tokyo Olympics, not the Winter Olympics, the Summer Olympics, and I watched all the teams march in to an empty stadium. The American team was the only multiracial team. That's the reason we beat the shit out of them in basketball and, track and, and nobody believed that any of the Black people there had affirmative action programs to get them on the team, And if you look at ads on TV now, 80% of the ads, 80% feature people of color. Now, that's a thing the ad agencies have done for a reason. And it probably is one of the reasons that the Trump constituency is really pissed off. But what nation in the world, in world history, has ever created a genuinely, authentically multiracial society? Zero. Zero. And we're closer to it than most. King said, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. It does it, but it doesn't do it in an even way. It goes down. After every major step forward, there's a backlash, and we've gone through one. We've just gone through one with Trump. So that's a long pattern. That's not going to be breaking news, but that it helps you think about. You're less vulnerable to the swoonish swings in one direction or the other. Like if I was sitting in the president's office when, let's say, they were deciding about to invade Iraq, I would say, let's bring in a historian of the Crusades. Okay, how did they go? What's the chance of a Western Christian society imposing its will on the people of the Middle East? What are the chances of Jeffersonian seeds of democracy growing in the deserts of the Middle East? Zero.
I heard that argument made too for Afghanistan, where it's like, look at it's called the graveyard of empires, isn't it?
Right. That's right. If you want to pick one place on the planet not to try to democratize,
right,
that would be it. That would be it. And my father, who fought in World War II, he was in the 82nd Airborne. He was dropped, on the night before D-Day, and he's buried at Arlington Cemetery. And every once in a while, when I go there, I look out, and there's this whole new region of Arlington Cemetery that's been developed since he was buried 20 years ago. That's only for casualties in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan. And so you look out there, and there's about 2,000 or 3,000. That's not all of them, because they don't all get buried here. But it's like, what did they die for? I mean, it's the Vietnam Wall is a mourning wall.
right,
It's not a celebratory wall. It's like the Holocaust Museum. Anyway, if I did something with the guy from CNN. He's got a morning program. But he's written a book on Washington, and so Matt Vernon the two of us talked. This was about a month ago, and I used the term unbreaking news, and he got pissed off. And he's a good guy too. I forget his name. I forget everybody's name now. And you're right as a journalist to recognize that we're in a moment where things could go one way or the other. You're right to ask whether Biden's up to the task. You're right to, to try to find out the sources of opportunity that this presents, and also, if we fail, what the outcome of that's going to be. If I can ever be any assistance down the road, let me know. But I'm in my public persona, I value the quality of my commentary based on the size of the hate mail it gets.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You did a good job.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I'm opposed to, in the academy, when I heard the word diversity first, I said, I guess they're not talking about me. And I said, I'm not going to do bad, rigged searches for you and all that. And so I made, anyway, if the largest threat to national security is nature and the climate, the longest standing problem that we can never quite solve, but we need to continue to make progress on, is racial prejudice. And now I was born a Southerner in Virginia, and I went to William and Mary. My wife, would you believe it, is from Mississippi. Yeah. 6 generations of white Mississippians have grown up believing a lie, that the war was not a war to preserve slavery. It was a war to defend themselves from invasion by Lincoln. Lincoln's like George III. You will never convince them. They have to die. Okay. You will never convince. But Baldwin said it. He said, we always thought that establishing a democracy across a continent and a large population was a very major challenge, but it's nothing compared to making that population genuinely multiracial. Nothing. That's, and I think that one we're going to win. It's going to, but we're living through a lot of outer edges of what I call the backlash moment. Okay, that's the downward lift. It's going to go back. One of the ironies is the backlash comes in response to an upward surge.
Right.
Okay, so you get Jim Crow after Reconstruction. You get Trump after Obama. So you start to lose after you just won. And as long as we keep winning more than we're losing, we're going to be in good shape. But that's who we really need to be. All right, listen, I've taken more of your time than I intended. I hope I've been.
I appreciated it. Thank you.
Who's in charge of Face the Nation now? It's a woman, right?
Yeah, now it is. Gosh, I can't think of her name.
Yeah. She's you see her on. She sometimes substitutes for CBS in the evening too.
Margaret Brennan. Yeah, Margaret Brennan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she's a smart cookie.
Oh
yeah. And what's the name of the guy that was head of it for many years? I did a couple programs for him back in the day, and he was a real big, longtime CBS reporter. And anyway, there's dialogue there. there's dialogue there. And,
Yeah.
and if somebody asks you a question about the Constitution, okay? And, you know, is the core principles federal or state power or some technical question like that? Say, no, the Constitution is not a set of eternal truths. It's a framework in which to argue about what they are. Okay, that'll always kill them. All right, I hope I've been helped. And
I appreciate it. I do got to get running though. Thank you, sir.
I know. Take care. Bye-bye.